على رسول الله وعلى نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل يا رب العالمين. The author rahimahullah continues in the book of Hajj and Umrah. Ibn Qudamah rahimahullah, he says, and he is on the chapter of the forms of Hajj and Umrah. So there are different types of Hajj that a person can do, and he will explain that and then define those different types and state which is the best type. He says, قال قوله وهو مخير بين التمتع والإفراد والقران وأفضلها التمتع ثم الإفراد ثم القران. He says he is given a choice of التمتع, إفراد or qiran, and these are different types of Hajj, of a Hajj, a version of Hajj. And then he says the best is أفضلها التمتع, the best is تمتع, then إفراد, then qiran. Then he says وَالتَّمَتُّعْ, and he's explaining what the different types of Hajj are. So he's explaining the tamattu' now. He says وَالتَّمَتُّعْ أن يحرم بالعمرة في أشهر الحج ويفرغ منها ثم يحرم بالحج في عامه. And التمتع, so Hajj al-Tamattu' is to go in the state of Ihram, to make Ihram for Umrah during the months of Hajj, and then finish it, and then so you finish your Umrah, and then you come out of the state of Ihram, and then you wait until the days of Hajj, and then when the days of Hajj come, you get back into the state of Ihram, and you make Hajj in the same year, the same year. So if a person were to go into Ihram and make Umrah in the months of Hajj, and then he makes Hajj the next year, that would not be considered tamattu'. He has to do it in the same year that he makes the Umrah in, and it has to be in the months of Hajj. Then he says وَالْإِفْرَادُ أَنْ يُحْرِمَ بِالْحَجِّ وَحْدَهُ. And Ifrad is to make Ihram or to go into Ihram for Hajj alone. So he goes into Ihram for Hajj alone, and he makes his way to Mecca and he performs Hajj. He doesn't have an Umrah attached with that Hajj at the beginning. وَالْقِرَانِ أَنْ يُحْرِمَ بِهِمَا أو يحرم بالعمرة ثم يدخل عليها الحج. And Qiran is to make Ihram for both Hajj and Umrah, or to make it for Umrah and then add Hajj to it. So Qiran is you make the intention, you come into Ihram for both Hajj and Umrah. So you will perform Hajj and then you perform Umrah after it. Or you perform Umrah and you don't come out of your Ihram, but you stay in your Ihram until you make Hajj. Right? So the difference between Qiran and Tamattu' is that Qiran you'll stay in your Ihram until Hajj, and you'll go and you'll make Hajj. Whereas Tamattu' literally means to have like pleasure or to relax. Tamattu', right? And it means that you come out of your Ihram and you go back in the state of Hajj, because you come out of that state of Ihram, which is a state that is, it's an uneasy state, right? Because you're not allowed to do certain things when you're in Ihram, and you can only wear a certain, type of clothing, and you can't, put perfume on, etc. Right? So the difference between Tamattu' and Qiran is Qiran that you will stay in Ihram for both Umrah and Hajj, right? Or you'll make the intention for Umrah and then you'll add Hajj to it. So you've made the intention for Umrah in the days or in the months of Hajj, and then you decide that you want to make Hajj that year and you add Hajj to it. وَلَوْ أَحْرَمَ بِالْحَجِّ ثُمَّ أَدْخَلَ عَلَيْهِ الْعُمْرَةَ لَمْ يَنْعَقِلُ إِحْرَامُهُ بِالْعُمْرَةِ. And if one makes Ihram for Hajj and then adds Umrah to it, his Ihram does not become valid for the Umrah. So if you make your intention for Hajj and then you want to change it to Umrah, you cannot do that, right? Because you're going from a greater from a Hajj, from a greater deed to a lower deed. Afwan, if a person wants to make Hajj, and he has that intention for Hajj only, and then he wants to add Umrah to it after, his Ihram cannot be valid for the Umrah. So your Ihram, if you want to make Hajj after, you have to go out of the Haram and come back in and do a separate, you have to do a separate intention or a separate Ihram for the Umrah. So you need to do a separate Ihram for the Umrah. You can't do the same, use the same Ihram for both, the same niyyah, if the Umrah is after. Then he says, فَإِذَا اسْتَوَى عَلَى رَاحِلَتِهِ لَبَّى فَيَقُولُ لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك ويستحب الإكثار منها ورفع الصوت بها لغير النساء. So he says, and now he's talking about the talbiyah, he says, once he is upon his mount, so when he starts traveling, he gets onto his bus or his horse or his camel, he should start making the talbiyah. So he's talking about where do you make the talbiyah, when do you start making the talbiyah. And the talbiyah starts as soon as you get onto your mount, after you've made the intention. So you've made the intention for Umrah, and then you get onto your mount. So perhaps you've went to the miqat, and then you've prayed behind the imam for a fard salah. You make the intention. When you get back to your car or your bus or your mount, then you start the talbiyah. And the talbiyah is to say, لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك. Then he says, he talks about the times when it is mustahab to emphasize on the talbiyah. He says, ويستحب الإكثار منها ورفع الصوت بها لغير النساء. And it is recommended to do talbiyah frequently and often, and to raise the voice while saying it for men only. وهي آكد فيها إذا, and it is emphasized, it is more stressed or emphasized in the following incidents: على نشزا أو حبط واديا أو سمع ملبيا أو فعل محظورا ناسيا أو لقي راكبا وفي أدبار الصلاة المكتوبة وبالأسحار وإقبال الليل والنهار So he says that it is more emphasized or stressed. So it means that you raise your voice or you start it again. Perhaps, during your trip to Mecca, you won't be saying it all the time, right? You'll get tired, right? So when do you start back, and when do you try to, start back your talbiyah, or, put more energy into it? And the following times, there are 8 times. When you're going up, when you're ascending a mountain or a hill, when you're going down a valley, when you hear someone saying it, then, that should encourage you to start yours up as well. Or when they do something out of forgetfulness that is unlawful during ihram. So if, for example, if you pull out one of your hairs by mistake, or you cut one of your nails by mistake, something that's unlawful in ihram, if you do something mistakenly, then it is recommended to say remind yourself of the talbiyah. Or they meet a group on their mount, so you meet another party, right? It is also mustahab to say it at that time. Number 6, at the time of mandatory prayers. So after mandatory prayers. So after you finish praying your mandatory prayers, it is mustahab to say the talbiyah. At the time before dawn, at the time of the approach of the night and the day. So these are the times when it is mustahab to emphasize on the talbiyah. And we will end off here, inshallah, for today. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين.
Just one question.
Yes.
For Hajj and Umrah, you don't pronounce the intention; it's in your heart. I mean, if you pronounce it, unlike others, but there is no need to specify the type like whether it is tamattu, ifrad, or qiran, they don't need to
specify the type. So the question is if you need to specify the type when you're doing Hajj. So actually, if you look at the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, there are mention of of not necessarily saying the type, but saying what you will do, the action that you'll be doing. So you say labbaik Allahumma umratan wa hajj if you're doing tamattu, or labbaik Allahumma hajj, for example, right? You will be saying another intention at the time of Hajj also, when you go into Ihram for Hajj, if you're doing tamattu. But you don't have to necessarily say it because you have the intention. But it's better to say it if you look at the ahadith. They mention what you will be doing, right? Yeah, you have a question?
التمتع طبعا تحرم بالعمرة.
Yes.
بعدين تروح
تعمل
تفسخ شو اسمه الإحرام. وقت الحج تبدأ.
وقت الحج نعم.
أيوة
تبدأ نعم.
هذا التمتع.
تبدأ يعني تلبس الإحرام وتنوي أيوة نعم.
تبدأ الحج.
أيوة.
هذا التمتع.
هذا التمتع.
القران ما هو الفرق بين القران
والتمتع؟
القران التمتع معروف. فيها عمرة
وفيها حج.
فيها حج. بين القران
والإفراد. الإفراد في حج فقط. والقران في حج وعمرة في إحرام واحد.
نفسهم كأكلينهم.
نعم.
ايش الفرق؟
لا القران في عمرة وفي حج في نفس الإحرام. Right. So you don't come out of your ihram.
So هم الاثنين.
لا الإفراد هو حج فقط بدون
الإحرام والعمرة بعدين.
لا الإفراد ما في عمرة.
ما في عمرة.
لا. هذا هو.
But what kind of